They laughed when I wasn't in the family photos. Their laughter died when the helicopter landed for me. The sound hit me first. A wave of polished, effortless laughter that seemed to drip from the crystal chandeliers. It was the sound of old money and new connections. A sound that had always known it belonged. I stood by a towering arrangement of white orchids, my fingers nervously straightening a stack of linen napkins. It was a pointless task, but it gave me something to do with my hands, a reason to exist in a room where I was fundamentally invisible. "Darling," a voice cooed, honey-sweet and razor-sharp. My stepmother, Isabella, glided toward me, a vision in emerald silk that probably cost more than my first car. A word of advice: don't linger near the head table. We wouldn't want the photographer to mistakenly include you in the official shots. Her hand landed on my arm, a gesture that looked affectionate to anyone watching. But her grip was vice-tight, and the subtle push that followed was anything but gentle. My heel caught on the leg of a nearby chair, and I stumbled back, heat flooding my cheeks. A titter of laughter rippled through the guests closest to us. "There she goes," a woman in pearls murmured, not even bothering to lower her voice. "Always so clumsy. Bless her heart," another added. "She does try so hard to fit in." I forced a smile onto my face, the same placid, unassuming mask I'd worn for years. Smile, nod, disappear. It was the unspoken rule of my existence in this family. Across the ballroom, my father was clinking glasses with Isabella's brother, his back to me. He'd seen the exchange. I knew he had, but his gaze slid away, as it always did. My stepsister, the bride, was a radiant blur of white satin, surrounded by her bridesmaids. She didn't glance in my direction. Why would she? I was the ghost at the feast, the cuckoo in the nest. But then, a new sound cut through the string quartet's rendition of a pop song. A deep, rhythmic thump-thump-thump that grew steadily louder, vibrating through the marble floor. The music faltered. Conversations died mid-sentence. All heads turned toward the grand, arched windows that overlooked the estate's gardens. The double doors to the terrace burst open, letting in a gust of wind that sent table cards fluttering to the floor. A man stood silhouetted in the doorway. He was dressed in a impeccably tailored charcoal gray suit, and he moved with an unnerving stillness that commanded the room without a word. His eyes, cool and assessing, scanned the crowd before landing unerringly on me. He walked straight through the parted sea of stunned guests, the click of his polished shoes echoing in the sudden silence. He stopped before me and gave a slight, formal bow. "Miss Thorne," he said, his voice low and resonant, "the aircraft is ready for your departure." Isabella's painted-on smile cracked. "Excuse me? There must be some mistake. This is a private wedding." The man didn't even look at her. His focus remained entirely on me. "No mistake, ma'am. Mr. Thorne sent me personally. He insists your presence is required." You could have heard a pin drop. I saw phones being discreetly lifted, cameras focusing. My father stood frozen, his champagne flute hovering in the air. For a heartbeat, I didn't move. My pulse was a wild drum in my ears. Then, I drew a slow, steadying breath. I let the stack of napkins I was holding fall gently onto a nearby table. I straightened the simple, off-the-rack cocktail dress Isabella had sneered at earlier. I took a step forward. Isabella moved to block my path, her composure finally shattering. "Ilara, what is this? What foolishness are you pulling now?" she hissed, her voice a venomous whisper. I met her gaze, and for the first time in my life, I didn't look away. "The kind of foolishness," I said, my voice soft but clear in the hushed room, "that ends your little game." The man in the gray suit extended a hand. I took it. The crowd parted for us as we walked out onto the terrace. The night air was cool and alive, whipping my hair around my face. On the manicured lawn, the sleek, black helicopter waited, its blades spinning a furious circle, scattering rose petals from the wedding arch into a blizzard of pink and white. I didn't look back. After a lifetime of silence, of being the family embarrassment, I was no longer the one being left behind. I was the one leaving. The door shut with a definitive thud, sealing me in a world of muted engine roar and plush leather. The man in the gray suit sat across from me, adjusting his headset. "Mr. Thorne wanted to ensure your safe arrival, Miss Thorne," he said. "He's waiting at the corporate headquarters. He said you would understand the significance." I nodded, my fingers gripping the edge of the seat as the city lights dropped away beneath us, transforming into a sprawling tapestry of gold and shadow. For years, I'd looked up at those same lights from a cramped studio apartment, wondering if I would ever escape the weight of my family's disdain. Tonight, I was looking down. My name is Ilara Thorne. For most of my life, I believed that endurance was a virtue. I thought if I was quiet enough, helpful enough, undemanding enough, I would eventually earn my place. I was wrong. Life doesn't reward silent suffering. It rewards those who decide to stop asking for a seat at the table and build their own. The lesson was a brutal one. 2 years ago, shortly after my father married Isabella, she decided the family home was too crowded. I was, in her words, a lingering reminder of a past life. My father, ever the diplomat, had handed me an envelope of cash and told me it was time to stand on my own 2 feet. So I did. I waitressed. I temped. I finally landed a job as a junior assistant at Ethon Industries, a cutting-edge tech firm owned by the notoriously private Julian Thorne. He was a man in his late 40s, all sharp angles and sharper intellect, with a reputation for zero tolerance of incompetence. I was invisible to him, just the girl who delivered his coffee and sorted his mail. Until one rainy evening, I was the last one in the office, cross-referencing a mountain of shipping manifests that everyone else had neglected. He found me at my desk, head bowed over the paperwork, fast asleep. "You don't have to outwork their disrespect, Ilara," he'd said, his voice startling me awake. He placed a steaming mug of tea next to me. "Your integrity will outlast their cruelty." That was the first night someone truly saw me. Weeks turned into months. He began mentoring me, first in small ways, explaining contract clauses, deconstructing business strategies, then in larger ones. He said he saw a quiet ferocity in me that the others lacked. I assumed it was pity. I was wrong. When Ethon underwent a major restructuring, he promoted me to a project lead, and when a private health battle forced him to step back, he named me as his successor. That was the secret Isabella and my father never knew, the secret no one in that glittering ballroom knew. Julian Thorne, the billionaire genius behind one of the most innovative companies in the world, had left his empire not to blood relatives or industry titans, but to the woman everyone else had overlooked. He bet his legacy on the one person who had been forged in fire and refused to break. The helicopter began its descent. Through the window, the Ethon Tower rose like a shard of obsidian against the night sky, its summit glowing with the angular logo I used to see on my morning commute. This time I wasn't looking up from the street. When we landed on the rooftop helipad, the pilot opened the door. The man in the gray suit nodded toward the entrance. "The board is assembled, Miss Thorne." I stepped out. The wind was stronger up here, a cleansing force. I could already see the flashes from paparazzi cameras on the streets below. The news was breaking. The new CEO of Ethon Industries is the woman humiliated at the Sterling wedding. And somewhere, in a ballroom now swirling with scandal instead of champagne, Isabella was realizing that the stepdaughter she'd spent a lifetime belittling now held the power she coveted most. A small, cold smile touched my lips. This wasn't about vengeance. This was about equilibrium. The elevator doors opened directly into the executive suite. The Ethon emblem, a stylized hawk in flight, was etched into the glass wall behind the reception desk. As I walked in, employees stared, their whispers a palpable hum. They were trying to reconcile the memory of the quiet, anxious assistant with the woman now walking toward the boardroom in a sharp, black pantsuit, a gift from Julian. "For the day you stop making yourself small," he'd written in the note that came with it. The boardroom doors swung open as I approached. Inside, the room fell silent. Executives I'd once fetched coffee for rose from their seats, their faces a mixture of shock and dawning comprehension. The announcement had gone out minutes before I landed. At the far end of the immense table, flanked by 2 empty chairs, sat Isabella. She had somehow beaten me here, her face a mask of powdered fury and panic. My father stood beside her, looking pale and shrunken. "Ilara," he began, his voice strained. "This is a surprise." "Not to me," I replied, setting my tablet on the table. "Julian entrusted me with Ethon months ago. The transition was always scheduled for today." Isabella let out a sharp, disbelieving laugh. "You? He left Ethon to you? The girl who couldn't even get a promotion without his charity? What did you do, poison his mind against us?" I turned to her, my posture unwavering. "He wasn't senile, Isabella, and I didn't poison anything. I learned. I worked. I earned every ounce of his trust while you were busy spending my father's fortune on art you didn't understand." A distinguished, gray-haired man at the table, Mr. Albright, the head of the legal committee, cleared his throat. "Mrs. Sterling, the succession documents are ironclad. Miss Thorne holds a controlling 68% of the voting shares." The color drained from Isabella's face. My father simply stared, his mouth agape. I took a single deliberate step toward them. "It's funny," I said, my voice calm. "You used to mock me for my second-hand clothes, for taking the bus. You said I'd never amount to anything more than a cautionary tale." My father found his voice, a weak, trembling thing. "We could have helped you, Ilara. We could have been a family." I met his gaze, the gaze that had so often looked through me. "A family doesn't require help to be seen, Father. You only see people when they become useful. Isabella shot to her feet, her composure finally obliterated. You listen to me, you ungrateful. No. I cut her off, the single word slicing through the room. You listen. The silence was absolute. I spent my life being quiet, waiting for people like you to acknowledge me. But respect isn't given to those who beg for it. It's taken by those who command it. I turned my attention to the assembled board. My first directive as CEO is a full, forensic audit of all holding companies and shell corporations linked to the Sterling Family Trust. If I find that Ethan assets have been used as a personal slush fund, my eyes locked back on Isabella, the responsible parties will be removed. Immediately, she opened her mouth, but no sound emerged. I gave a small, cold smile. Security will see you out. Your access to Athon property is hereby revoked. You can't do this, she finally shrieked. I believe the share structure says otherwise. I replied softly. You taught me to always read the fine print. The doors opened, and 2 security officers entered. As they escorted a sputtering Isabella from the room, my father reached a hand toward me, a silent, pathetic plea. I watched them go, my expression neutral. When the doors closed, I finally allowed myself to exhale. The silence that remained wasn't awkward. It was the sound of a new order. Mr. Albright approached, a genuine smile on his face as he extended his hand. Welcome, Miss Thorne. I have a feeling Athon is in for a remarkable era. I shook his hand and looked out the floor-to-ceiling window at the city below. The same streets I'd walked, feeling small and unseen, now looked like a circuit board of infinite possibility. The warmth in my chest wasn't the heat of revenge. It was the quiet, steady burn of peace. The next morning, sunlight streamed into my new office, painting the skyline in hues of rose and gold. I sat at Julian's desk, my desk now, a cup of black coffee in hand. The headlines were everywhere, from Wallflower to War Boss, Ilara Thorne's stunning ascent. A part of me, the girl who still remembered every slight, expected to feel triumphant. Instead, I felt a profound stillness. The chapter was closed. My assistant, a sharp young woman named Anya, buzzed the intercom. Miss Thorne, your father is here. He's insisting on seeing you. I paused, then said, send him in. He looked older, the lines on his face deeper, his expensive suit rumpled. Ilara, he started, his voice rough. I didn't know where else to go. Isabella left. She cleared out the accounts. I gestured to the chair opposite me. You had years to come to me, Dad. Why now? She's gone, he repeated, as if the words themselves were a physical blow. You were right. About everything. He looked up, his eyes swimming with a grief I couldn't quite place. I failed you. I thought keeping the peace was the same as being a family. I said nothing, letting the weight of his confession hang in the air. Quote, I watched the videos, he whispered, of you walking out. You looked so powerful. I didn't recognize my own daughter. Maybe you never really looked, I said, my voice steady. You lost a daughter long before today. You lost her every time you chose to look the other way. He nodded, a tear finally escaping and tracing a path through his stubble. Julian. He saw what I was too blind to see. He taught me that my value wasn't determined by your approval, I said quietly. That strength is built in the dark, when no one is watching. I don't deserve your forgiveness. No, I agreed softly. You don't, but I deserve my peace. I stood and walked to the window, looking down at the city that was now, in a very real way, mine. You tried to make me small, Dad, so I built something too big for you to ignore. He left a few minutes later, a broken man finally facing the consequences of a lifetime of passive cruelty. After he was gone, I remained at the window, watching the city pulse with life. My phone chimed. A single message from an unknown, encrypted number. The hawk has landed. Soar. Elara. Negative JT. I froze. Julian's initials. It couldn't be real. He was gone. It had to be an automated message, a final piece of his meticulous planning. But then I remembered his words, spoken in this very office. When you finally step into the light, don't just shine. Blaze so brightly you erase every shadow they tried to cast over you. A slow, genuine smile spread across my face. Maybe it was from him. Maybe it was just the universe offering a perfect punctuation mark. It didn't matter. That evening, I stood on the rooftop helipad once more. The wind tugged at my clothes, a familiar, empowering feeling. There was no crowd below, no gasping audience, just the vast, open sky. Never again, I whispered into the twilight, and as I looked out at the horizon, I didn't feel like a victor celebrating a conquest. I felt like a ship, finally free of its anchor, ready to catch the wind. They had tried to bury me in their disdain and dismissal. They never realized they were just planting a seed, And now, I was the forest that had grown from it.